Thanks so much. Thanks for asking me to come and speak to you. I appreciate it, and I wish to start with a disclaimer that my views are my views. They're not UJ views, and they're not the convocations. It's always hard to speak after someone as accomplished and as amazing as Musa, because they bring you up, and all of us sit there and say, wow, I want to do that zipline thing, and I want to be that, and so forth and so forth. And then Justice Malala comes on, and the stuff that I speak about is not exactly the most edifying, shall we say. Because I talk about the stuff that's happening all around us, the leadership challenges that we face, the headlines that we have, and a lot of them have massive impact on all of us. We all have families, have children. We all have to think about the impact of all this political action on our pockets, on economic growth, whether we can still make that projected 1.5%, or are we going to languish at 0.3, 0.4%, and so forth and so forth. So politics has a profound impact on our political landscape. It has a profound impact on our fortunes as a country and as a continent. And it's not always just what we do, it's what the rest of the world does. When you've got a Donald Trump in the White House, when you've got the UK leaving the EU and doing its own thing, all these things can lead to many people saying, what's happening with our world? What does the future look like? What's going to happen? And so forth. Here in South Africa, I suspect that we will have further political action. All of you, I'm sure, last Monday were glued to your TV sets as there was a debate about a secret ballot. That is likely to have some impact. If there is a secret ballot, we could have major political changes, and they could be positive or negative. But we all know that political events and political changes lead to impacts. We saw what happened in December 2015, and the reaction to that was immediate and devastating for many of us. So, the one thing you can say about our politics is that it don't put you to sleep. Not just us here at home, all of us. So what I'm hoping to be able to do today is speak to you about some of the issues that I think, and Musa used the word in his speech earlier. He spoke about signals, being able to see the signals that mean that things are changing, that mean that there's a shift in what our world looks like, and what that shift could mean for your business, for you personally, for all of us. So I'm going to go through some of these signals that I think we should watch out for. I could stand here and say, I think in December this is going to happen, I think that is going to happen, and I might do a bit of that, but I think it's absolutely important for all of us to be able to identify some of these shifts that could happen. The first thing I intend to do is to talk about the things that I believe will continue to drive our politics and have an impact on our economy. I see on your program later on in the day you have the former finance minister coming to speak to you, and that's fantastic. That's hopefully I will be here for it, and I hope to also glean some knowledge about what is happening exactly in our politics. But for me, there are three key drivers of our politics over the short term, and that means that there's going to be turbulence with that, with these drivers being in place. The first one is that for 23 years, all of us have lived in this South Africa with the ANC being at the heart and center of our politics. That ANC no longer exists. It's essentially almost at the level of a split. The ANC is pulling this way and that way. The ANC is run down the middle, and two main factions are pulling in two different directions. Now, you might like the ANC, you might not like the ANC, but when you have a governing party that is united and says, this is the plan, even if the plan is not great, you know that this is the plan, and this is the plan that's being implemented. But if you have two ANCs, two governing parties, one pulling this way, one pulling that way, you have a problem because you don't know where policy is coming from, where policy will go. Is it inclusive growth or is it radical economic transformation? Give me one and let's implement it, whichever one it may be. So for me, this is going to be a major driver of our politics. A lot of what you see, whether it's a cabinet reshuffle, whether it's a movement that is state-owned enterprise, a lot of what we're seeing and a lot of the politics that are of so much concern are really about, oh, this faction is pulling this way or that faction is asserting itself in one or other part of our economy. And that will continue to permeate our society and our economy. The second one is one that Musa touched on, and it's the fact that we have 54% youth unemployment in South Africa. We talk about 27% unemployment. It's 36%. When you say 27%, we don't talk about the kids who say, I'm not going to look today. So as you and I got ready to come here this morning, nearly 4 million of our fellow South Africans said, you know what, I'm going to stay at home because I know I won't find one. I just know I won't find a job. So long as we have this, we can sit in this room, but just 2 kilometers away from us is El Dorado Park, and what was going on there last week? What was going on there the week before that? Young people out on the streets, and you say, oh, how come they're rioting and doing this and so forth? It's because, well, there are no jobs. So for me, this is a structural issue. I think it's going to have an impact on all of us for a significant amount of time. If we don't resolve the unemployment problem, then South Africa will find itself in a very unhappy place, at least for the short to medium term. The final driver of our politics that I think we don't talk about enough and we should be talking about a little bit more is skills and education. Why are we in this room today? It's because all of us have had the ability there, and this shouldn't be the way it is, but for many, many of us, the luck to be able to finish school and get into higher education. This, for me, is the most depressing graph I use. Out of every 100 kids that we send to school at age 7, 4 get a degree within 6 years after matric. So you think about the horror that we subjecting people to here. Where are they? How do we end up with a number like that? And so for me, we can talk a lot about, oh, you know, we need to grow the economy, we need to do this, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. But without doing something about the skills challenge, about the education challenge in South Africa, we'll continue to stay at 0.4% growth, less than 1%, or if we're lucky, 2%. But what does that do? 2% growth, we'll continue to talk about jobless growth in South Africa. So I think that is, those three are the key drivers of our politics over the next few years. The signals that I spoke about, the signals that I think we should all look out for are many, and I'll go through them quickly so that we can all make up our minds for ourselves about what is likely to happen. The first one is that for someone like me, I'm in my 40s now, the 1994 vote, that settlement was pivotal. It was huge. It was, this is the beginning of something new, hopeful, and meaningful for all of us. The agreement between the National Party and the ANC and other players, Nelson Mandela and FW de Klerk, this was a seminal moment. For the past 23 years, this is what we have lived, the idea of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic South Africa. But here on this campus, all across South Africa, young people are saying, what are you saying to me, Justice? That, oh, I should be happy I have the vote. What about the fact that there are people who are not here today who have the ability to be in this institution and can't get in because they don't have money? They're asking questions, they're coming up with new phrases, economic freedom and so forth. I think this is a major signal in our society. I don't think leaders should ignore it. I think that we should be listening a little bit harder and finding ways, not violent, not exclusionary, but saying what's going on here. The idea, the fees must fall, roads must fall, the fallist movement in general, are we going to ignore it and say, no, they're young people, they're radical and so forth, or do we say, is there something to this? What do we say to a fallist activist when 54% of young people are without jobs? And we say, no, it's a great South Africa. That's what I say. That's what I've grown up with the past 23 years. So I think this is going to be a major issue. If it's a negative conversation, then it's a negative signal. But if we harness it and say, let's come out with something positive from this conversation, then I think we're beginning to say something. One of the things that I think in that conversation is key is that for a long time, the ANC likes to call itself the leader of society. And that's because the ANC, in many ways, in its ideas, managed to get us through tough knots in our political and social lives. But where's the ANC? If the ANC is divided, one part pulling this way and one part pulling that way, who steps in and has part of that conversation? So waiting for the ANC to be part of that conversation, in my view, is futile because the conversation is happening elsewhere and the ANC is too busy with its internal problems. So I think this is going to be a major issue and includes all sorts of things. Talk about white monopoly capital. Did they sell out in 1994 and so forth and so forth. It could become negative, it could become positive, but it's a major, major signal in South Africa. Economic nationalism, it's not just here in South Africa, all over the world. Why is Donald Trump saying, I'm going to build a wall? Well, I don't want these guys, and so forth and so forth. It's basically you're seeing it more and more across the world, us and them, us and them. If we have the same sort of thing in South Africa, where it's us and them and exclude them, let's just be us in here, then it's a negative conversation. If you say, okay, we need to talk about inclusive growth, we don't need to destroy the one and to build the other, then you have a different conversation altogether. Populism is also something that's rising across the globe, and here in South Africa, we're not immune to that. Last year, I think it was a significant moment when the ANC lost the city of Tshwane, this Nelson Mandela Bay, and here in the city of Johannesburg. I was in Cape Town yesterday. As I left, people said, enjoy Cape Town North. I said, why? They said, it's because you're run by the DA now. So the ANC had significant losses on August 3 last year. How does it behave post that? Does it take on a populist stance to say, oh, we'll do this for you and so forth, or does it self-examine and say, no, these are the issues that confront us, we need to deal with them head on or not? President Zuma has introduced or reintroduced the idea of radical socio-economic transformation after the ANC lost those elections. Is this real? Does it mean that we are seeing real policy change on the cards, or is it something that's just a nice phrase that appeals to people? I need to say, President Zuma, it's not the first time that he used this expression. He used it in 2014 after the ANC went from 65.9% to 62% of the vote. He used it in 2011 when Julius Malema was being radical and saying, let's nationalize the mines, and so forth and so forth. So I think radical socio-economic transformation, as it is being put on the table right now, is just a phrase, it's populism. I think that there is a debate to be had in South Africa about what exactly have we done with this economy in 23 years. I'm not sure that it's in that phrase alone. Perhaps at the ANC policy conference in June we'll have something. But for now, I think that we are in a different place. I think that a major signal for the next 10 years is going to be the issue of land. Land is something that has roiled South Africa in its politics since 1913. Before that, with the arrival of the colonists, there is a big debate now that has started. President Jacob Zuma said in February, land expropriation without compensation. He has support inside the ANC. Lindiwe Zulu has said, we can change the constitution, we should be able to do that. Ayanda Dlodlo, who's the new Deputy Minister of Communications, said the ANC should have voted with the EFF on the issue of land expropriation. President Zuma says black parties need to band together and change Section 25 of the Constitution. My view is that the next 10 years we will be consumed by debate on land, and that will have its own implications. For me, I'll be watching the ANC policy conference on the 30th of June. The KwaZulu-Natal ANC has put on the table that, that we should have a referendum, a bit like what happened with the Brexit vote in the UK. And we should ask people, one, do you support expropriation without compensation? Two, should the constitution be amended? If the ANC adopts that at the conference in June, it will go to the national conference in December, and if that is adopted, we will likely have a referendum. If we have a referendum, I have no doubt that it will be yes to question 1 and yes to question 2, and we will have movement on this issue. Even if there is no expropriation without compensation, my view is that land will remain a major issue in South Africa. It's something that perhaps we've avoided for a long time, and maybe we should have that conversation now. There are new laws that are coming. The Restitution of Land Right Amendment Act has been sent back to Parliament, is coming back. There's about 12 other pieces of legislation that are coming, and I think this will be a marker. People will still speak about, oh, Zimbabwe will be like us or not, and so forth and so forth. I don't think it's a useful example, but we can get to it a little bit later on. But land, in my view, is going to be the central issue for debate in South Africa over the next few years. A big signal, in my view, in our politics and politics globally are the institutions. Do the institutions work? My view is that if today I've said something that offends you and you want to sue me, that's great, because you're saying you trust the judges. But if you say, no, justice is rich or he's politically connected, I can't sue him because he'll win, then it's over. There is no point because the institutions are gone. So the ability to say that is itself a triumph, and that's what we need to preserve. So do the institutions work? If a foreign investor, if a domestic investor wants to put money into South Africa, if I say to Musa, hook me up with those zipline guys, I want to do the same thing in South Africa. One of the things will be, what if someone steals our patent? Can we take them to court? What if Musa steals the patent and wants to do it here because the rest of us don't know about zipline? Can they sue him and say, this guy stole our stuff? If they say yes, that means the institutions work, and they, this is a good environment. So do the institutions work? We have lots of institutions in South Africa. Some of them have been great, some not so great. Some are to be admired, some not to be so admired. So I think if you see the institutions falling, then we have a problem, because we have nothing that guides us. If you have institutions that people trust, people say, that's a great institution. Look at the judiciary. Look at the constitutional court. Then you have a country and you have an environment to work in. Corruption and corruption at high levels. A lot of people, the perception that President Jacob Zuma is in the pockets of one family, that family has so much power that it appoints ministers. It's very negative for any kind of investment by anyone. If we continue to see events like what we saw at ESCOM last week, then we have a real problem, because the perception is that there are people who eat and people who don't eat, and that is something that we need to work with. Leadership is absolutely important. if we choose the right leaders, then I believe we will begin a journey towards. Am I that bad? Are you leaving? Leadership is absolutely key. My view is that the ANC will still win. I saw Cyril Ramaphosa saying yesterday that the ANC needs to do something urgently. Everyone is saying the ANC needs to do something before 2019. My view is that the ANC will win the national elections in 2019. It might lose here in Gauteng or some other parts, but I believe that the ANC will remain above 50%. And I see this gentleman is disagreeing with me, but we can take it outside. My view is that the history, the sheer persistence of the brand that is the ANC will carry through in 2019 by a small margin. Perhaps it might, by a small margin, but who it chooses as a leader will be very important. There are two contenders, Cyril Ramaphosa and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. It is important to understand that in South Africa, we run a party system. So the party chooses a leader, and you vote when you go to vote for a party. The key thing to watch with the ANC leadership race is not who is on the front page of the Times or the Star or who's on television and so forth. The key thing to watch is who will go to the ANC conference in December, where a new leader will be chosen. KwaZulu-Natal will send most of the delegates. At the moment, it stands at 158. The second biggest is the Eastern Cape at 124. So the key will be, if KwaZulu-Natal remains united and backs Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, plus Mpumalanga, the Northwest and the Free State, plus the Youth League and the Women's League, it means that right now she is ahead and is most likely to win. If there was to be an election today, my view is that she would win. There is still 6 months to go. It could change. But I don't think one of the mistakes we make is to say, oh, you know, Cyril is so nice, he speaks so well, or this or that, and so forth. It's not public popularity. It's whether you're supported by those 4,500 to 5,000 delegates who will pitch at conference. So as it stands, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is most likely to win. I'm sympathetic to that idea that look at what men have done in South Africa, and perhaps it's time indeed for a woman to take over in South Africa. We can't say men have covered themselves in glory. There is a big debate inside the ANC now about should those two stand down and should the party elect someone else. So there's a big debate about a compromise candidate, and that candidate, a lot of people are talking about Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who's the treasurer of the ANC. He also will be subject to essentially the same demands, and it is that, do you have support inside the branches? You can't talk about leadership in South Africa without considering Julius Malema. Julius Malema has been leader of the EFF since he left the ANC Youth League. If you think about today being here in Johannesburg, the city of Joburg, the DA is in power because Julius Malema has said we will vote with you. The DA is in power in the city of Tshwane because the EFF has said we will vote with you. That gives Julius Malema incredible amounts of power over the next 10 years. If, say, and I believe the ANC will lose in Gauteng in 2019, and let's say the ANC goes to 46% from where it sits at 54% of the vote, to form a coalition government, the DA will have to go to Julius Malema and the EFF and say, brother, let's work together. And what will he say? These are my demands. If the ANC wants to run Gauteng, it will have to do the same thing. So Julius Malema's power as a kingmaker will be enhanced in 2019. In 2021, let's say a city like Polokwane in the north is most likely to go, the EFF is at 35% of the vote in Polokwane. It is most likely to go to 45 in 2021. And that means that you're looking at a coalition of some sort with the EFF running a major metro in South Africa. So you can't talk about leadership without putting in the mix Julius Malema. You can't talk about leadership without putting in the mix Mmusi Maimane of the DA. The DA people underestimate because the DA went from 1.7% in 1994. It now stands at 27%. Now, if Helen Zille stopped tweeting, the key dates will be, in my view, as I said, in disagreement with the gentleman here, the key dates for me are 2021, the local elections, and 2024, the national election. There is only one liberation movement that has survived in power beyond 30 years, and that is the Congress Party in India. Every other liberation movement has lost power in 30 years or has become a dictatorship. So Robert Mugabe has been in power for 37 years, but there is no free or fair political play in Zimbabwe. So it's either, if you're in a democratic environment, 30 years is about right. And my view is that the ANC is essentially on a trajectory that's like Kenneth Kaunda in Zambia, Kanu in Kenya, and many, many others. A big question, which is a short-term one, is will President Zuma go? A lot of people have said that President Zuma have put pressure on him to go. It increased last year after the British Brexit vote. People said, look what he did, can't you do the same? As I said, we run a party system in South Africa. It's not up to me or you. It's up to the National Executive Committee of the ANC. The National Executive Committee of the ANC is made up of 86 members plus 18 members from the provinces. They make the decision. There's a meeting of the NEC in 2 weeks' time, and as happened in November last year, someone could raise their hand and say, President Zuma, will you step down? My view is that that National Executive Committee is 55% in support of President Jacob Zuma, and it is unlikely that he will be recalled like Thabo Mbeki was recalled in 2008. My count puts it at about 54% at the moment. President Zuma, it's come down. President Zuma had 75% support in December 2012 when he won the ANC presidency for the second time in Mangaung. His biggest support base is in the provinces, particularly in the Free State, Northwest, Mpumalanga, and KwaZulu-Natal. Will he be impeached? For an impeachment process, our constitution demands a 2/3 majority. It is unlikely. The ANC is at 62%. ANC leaders from Jackson Mthembu to Gwede Mantashe have said that we will solve our problems ourselves. It is unlikely that the ANC would allow an opposition party to bring an impeachment motion and say, yes, get rid of our leader. So it's unlikely to happen. The motion of no confidence demands 50% plus 1. The ANC has 249 MPs. The opposition has the rest of the 400. So if 50 of them moved, then there would be a majority with the opposition saying a motion of no confidence. I don't think it's going to happen, this motion of no. I think the Constitutional Court, I'm not a legal expert, the Constitutional Court may rule either way, and that's possible, but the key will be whether ANC MPs will vote against President Zuma. If it's an open ballot, I don't think it will happen. If it's a secret ballot, then I think we could have a whole new scenario. But an open ballot, I don't see ANC members doing it. If it's a secret ballot, I think that the ANC would recall President Zuma before the motion comes to parliament, because the ANC doesn't want its leader to be defined by the EFF or the DA winning that motion. Musa spoke about this, and I think he spoke quite eloquently about it. The big question is that, yes, the positive coverage and so forth, and so is it the end of the negativity? Then we went through the Africa Rising period, and then, oh, is it the end, and so forth and so forth. My view is that we'll continue to have problems. The problem with all those covers of the economies that we always put up when we talk about the continent is that they are broad strokes. No one says what's happening in South Africa or what's happening in Kenya. And that makes it difficult to say, oh, we're all the same, and so forth and so forth. So you might have war returning to Burundi and so forth. You might have people like Bartley saying we're pulling out of Africa and we've had enough and so forth. But for me, I think all that points to what Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie said, and it's be careful of a single narrative. And the narrative of the past 10 years has been, oh, Africa is going to be amazing, it's going to be fantastic, we've got lots of young people, technology is here, and so forth, without saying what is happening in a particular jurisdiction. It's not the same straight line. I think that it's a complicated picture, and the future for me is that it won't always be perfect. There will be countries like Botswana next door which will continue to do incredibly well. There are countries like South Africa which will muddle along, and there are countries like Nigeria which will struggle, but I believe democracy is becoming better there. And so I think it's a complicated story. The one thing about the continent that I think we are not doing is talking about China and its influence on the continent and its impact on the continent. I think China, as you have seen with our country's interaction with China, China is going to be a massive, massive player on our continent. And I think we are not talking enough about what the content of that interaction will look like. I know I've been very negative, so I thought I'd leave you on a happy note. The happy note is, I think we've done some amazing things over the past year in a very bad environment, and we need to do more of those things. The first thing that we did after the firing of Nhlanhla was that CEOs of companies, JSE-listed companies, flew down to Cape Town, met President Jacob Zuma, met Finance Minister at the time, Pravin Gordhan, and came out with two things. And those things are huge. The first one was an entrepreneurship fund. They put 2 billion rand in a kitty and said, any young person who wants to start a business, apply. There will be a fast-track process, and we will fund you if you've got a great idea. It's up and running. I don't know if people are applying for it or not. Then there's a 50 billion rand jobs fund, money from businesses saying we've got to train young people to become all sorts of things, and we will fund businesses to take them in as interns. That fund, it's up and running, and it showed an amazing thing. Business, government, and labor working together to do something. We now have the minimum wage in South Africa. Did you see the trade unions marching against it? No, it was because the trade unions wanted to work with business and government. And for me, that was a positive thing. So if you look at what Moody's, what Fitch, what S&P were saying last year, they said the fact that government and business and labor are working together is the reason why we are not downgrading you. The reason why we are being downgraded now is because that relationship has been blown apart. So you listen to what this past weekend, Business Leadership South Africa goes to an SACP in Bizo, and you realize that, you know, that relationship is gone and it needs to be repaired. So if there's anything you should, in my view, we should see is, again, President Zuma, our finance minister, business leaders, labor leaders, sitting all together. Then people will say these guys have a plan and want to do something about it. The second one is what I've spoken about before, the institutions. If more institutions are seen to be collapsing, then we are in trouble. Last year, Fitch was very specific. We didn't downgrade you because your institutions are strong and are independent. They must remain so. Otherwise, we'll be in big, big trouble. So if you see an incident like what we saw with the Chief Justice's office being burgled, computers on the ground floor being left, and people going specifically for the computers in the HR department, then you have to say, what's going on here? It's not good. Something that many people might say it's not a positive. Well, it's not a positive for some because the election didn't look too good on August 3. But it's a positive thing that we have Joburg, we have Tshwane, we have Nelson Mandela Bay, maybe Rustenburg, being run by an opposition. It means that we have competition in the political system. Why is UJ such a fantastic university? It's because the competition is across the road. There's some minor university this way. So, and constantly the guys at UJ are thinking, those guys are coming after us. So we've got to keep on making our game better and better and better. And for me, that is that if it's good in business, it should be good among our political parties. Today, I heard the mayor of Joburg speaking on radio, and he's running around trying to say, I'm the guy, I'm Mr. Fix-It, because it's just 4.5 years to go, and I'll be judging him. And will I take my vote to the ANC or to the EFF? He wants to stay in power. He wants the DA to stay in power. And I think he's going to fix the potholes, because otherwise I'm going to vote for someone else. And I think this is a very, very positive thing. 11 million people voted for the ANC in 2014. Only 8 million voted for the ANC in 2016. In just 2 years, 3.3 million people stayed at home. And for the ANC, the big question is, what are they going to do? Are they going to go back? Are they going to go elsewhere? And if the ANC doesn't pull up its socks, they will find a new home. And that, for me, is not a bad thing at all. The best thing for me about South Africa is that we've become a more vibrant civil society. Power is not in one place, it's all over the place. People, when they see something wrong, they stand up and organize and march and say, not in my name. And that is a good thing. If the president or in any country, if the powers that be tell us something and we say yes, yes, and we don't respond, then we have a problem. You don't have a civil society. You need civil society, you need an opposition, you need a country that works. So what does the future look like? Will the ANC collapse and die, as some predict, in 2019? I think there are several scenarios for South Africa. The first one is that, things don't work out and we are on the road to ruin. The key characteristic of that is when all of you in the room are not participating in the life of South Africa, if there's no civil society. If people are quiet, if people are not part of this democracy, then it will end and it will be over for South Africa. The scenario that I think it's a tough one, but that we're going through, is scenario 2, which is that we come together. And the elements of that is citizen engagement, people speaking up, saying a whole lot of things, ability of citizens to organize themselves, to engage, whether it's your city council, your mayor, and so forth. But the key is this is not an easy scenario. It's full of noise because people are saying, oh, this, and people are saying, oh, that, and so forth. It's a democracy. So it's not easy, it's full of noise, and sometimes it's scary. But it's a good scenario because it means that the society is alive to itself as a country. The worst one is when we all walk away and we just muddle along and the state starts saying, no, I'll do this for you, I'll do that for you, I'll do this for you, and we all sit at home and we make money and we don't care about the rest of South Africa. That's all I have to say. Thank you for asking me to come and speak to you. I just want to say as my departing point that I know it's hard. When I opened with that slide, people said, oh no, look at what's happening at Eskom, it's the end of the world. I don't believe the world is ending in South Africa. I'm reminded of that because of this picture. It's a picture, it's the front page of the Sunday Times that appeared on February 11, 1990. In 1990, if UJ, as it was then, a different entity, had asked me to come and speak at your leadership seminar, imagine what on that Monday morning, February 12th, people were saying. They were saying, oh dear, that communist is out. Because Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster on February 11, and he said nationalization, expropriation without compensation are the policies of the ANC, and we are going to nationalize as soon as we get into power. And people were saying, it's over, take my money out. This country is going to the dogs. It's terrible, and so forth, and so forth. Well, in 1990, by the way, 4,000 people were killed in political violence in South Africa. Today I've spoken about politics, not once have I spoken about people dying. It's, oh, that one is, no. So what happened in 1990? Well, 4 years later, we had scenes like this all over South Africa, a free and fair election in this country. We went on to buy a World Cup. No, sorry, no. We did some great things. We did amazing, beautiful things as South Africa. So sometimes we sit and say it's the end of the world, it's the worst of the worst. My view is that time is an important consideration in all these things. In 1990, they were saying it's the end of the world, and it hasn't been the end of the world. Today, we sit there and say it's the end of the world, and it's not the end of the world. So sometimes I think we need to consider the fact that we like extremes in South Africa. We like to say, oh, it's bad, it's terrible, we are the worst, or no, we are the best. So we go and do something, and there's a nice front page. It's, oh man, South Africa is fantastic. A friend of mine invited me to go and watch rugby with him. Now, I don't know anything about rugby. So I said, no, I can't come to watch the rugby with you. He said, no, come, there'll be beer. So I went. But what was interesting was that, this was a big game. It was an important game. And I get to his house, we have a beer, we sit in front of the telly, we watch the game. It was the first game of the last Rugby World Cup in 2015. And those of you who follow rugby will know that South Africa, the Springboks were playing against Japan. And, that all goes well. But end of the game, the Japanese walloped the Springboks. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, we lost, it's just a game. But David is crying, he's weeping. I said, David, are you okay? He says, Justice, it's the end of the world. I said, no, man, have a beer. He says, no, it's the end of the world. And I'm taking it so lightly, he says, Justice, I think you should leave. I say, hey, man, it's a game. He says, no, it's the end of the world. Leave, Justice. So I leave. I see him at my daughter's school. Our kids go to the same school. I say, hey, David. And David doesn't talk to me for day one. I think, wow, man, geez, this guy's taking it badly. Day 2, day 3, still not talking to me. Day 4, my phone rings and David says, Justice, come and watch the rugby. I say, David, no, I can't. Your mood swings are a little bit too much for me. He says, no, there'll be beer. So I get to his house. We watch the second game of the second Springbok game of the Rugby World Cup, and lo and behold, the Springboks play their hearts out and they win. They beat Scotland, and I can't remember what the score is. And David is hugging me, kissing me, Justice. I say, David, what's going on? And he says, man, we are the greatest country in the world. The spirit of Madiba is back. We're going to win this thing. We are amazing. And he's singing Shosholoza and stuff. And I'm thinking, wow. So in 1 week, we went from being absolutely the worst in the world. How can we be defeated by the Japanese to being, oh, we are the champions of the world, we can beat anyone, bring it on, where are the All Blacks and la 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 la. So I think for me the lesson is that yes, we're going through some tough times as a country, but it's not the extremes that are true. The truth is somewhere in the middle. So if I'm to leave you with anything, I think we can all learn from my good friend Julius Malema, who has gone to the extremes and come back to the middle. Thank you.
Thanks.